TfL could eliminate fare dodging if they had thousands of staff on every single gate line checking everyone almost manually. That clearly would work, but the cost to the operator would be enormous. So there is always going to be some fare dodging, and someone very persistent will always get through the barriers. It's all about what's the sort of tolerable level, and where do you pitch that? It just shows something that if you live in London, you'll be very aware of, which is people just pushing through barriers behind you, often sort of, asking you to go first, sort of almost politely saying, I'm going to push behind you, mate. Do you mind if you go through first? Which I can't work out if it's better or worse. But it definitely feels like it's on the up post-pandemic, and you only have to look at TikTok to see the numbers of people giving sort of tips on how to do it, or showing evidence of other people doing it, to see that it feels like it's everywhere, and the perception that it feels like it's everywhere may even be encouraging it.
And I mean, look, I've noticed it. I notice it every day when I use the tube. People brazenly are doing it, just pushing through the barrier. It always surprises me because tube stations are full of cameras, CCTV cameras in all the entrances and exits. So they know they're going to be on camera. And even I've witnessed it happen in front of TfL, as Transport for London staff. And that's what has got a lot of people scratching their heads, saying, why aren't the staff doing anything?
Well, you don't have to look at another set of headlines in London to see the risks of taking on people who are aggressive in your face and may or may not be carrying a weapon. I think it's the same one we see with shoplifting. You can ask the question, why isn't the Tesco Express security guard intervening to stop someone who may or may not be armed? Well, the answer is they're not paid very much, and why should they risk their life to sort of stop a relatively low value crime? And I think this is another interesting thing is, TfL could eliminate fare dodging if they had thousands of staff on every single gate line checking everyone almost manually. That clearly would work, but the cost to the operator would be enormous. So there is always going to be some fare dodging, and someone very persistent will always get through the barriers. It's all about what's the sort of tolerable level, and where do you pitch that?
Do you have any sympathy with, we see that in the piece, people who are caught saying, well, look, not only can I not afford to pay the £100 fine when people are caught, but I can't actually afford to pay to travel on the underground. I mean, it is the most expensive public transport network in the world. Central Zone journey between zones 1 to 4 costs now £4.60. Have you got any sympathy with that, Jim? The fact that actually for a lot of people working in the capital, the tube is unaffordable.
Yeah, I mean, I do have sympathy. I'm lucky enough to earn a salary that means that if I need to get the tube, I can afford to without really thinking about it. But if you really are on a minimum wage job, that sort of £8 back and forth to get to the job makes quite a big difference if you're on irregular hours. Equally, some people are clearly just taking the mickey and just don't fancy paying. And I think it's also careful not to imagine everyone is a hooded young man in a temporary job. I've certainly heard enough middle class people brag about how they don't feel like paying because they've noticed that it's not getting enforced. It's not all just the same type of person that's doing this. I think it's a bit more prevalent across the board than people realize. Anyone, when they notice enforcement isn't happening, is going to take their chances.
Do you think we're going to see action taken by TfL after these revelations?
Well, it feels like one of those that people are really starting to get bothered by. And if politicians start putting pressure on and it starts to become politically embarrassing. But I do think there's that equilibrium. Fare dodging is as old as any form of public transport. It's always going to happen. People are always going to try and get away with it. It's how much resources worth putting into it. And actually, I think the real thing that will change this could be facial recognition software. TfL's already trying it on some places and getting people, very persistent fare dodgers, caught that way. I think that might be the way that you suddenly find a switch is flicked and a lot of people can't get away with it anymore, especially if they're persistent.
Yeah, and the knock-on consequences of what's going on, as you said, is just more surveillance. I mean, as you said, look, fare dodging is not something new, and as it says in the article here, there is a target of 1.5% of travel being that of fare dodging, but at the moment it starts at 3.8%, so more than double the target. Jim, I wonder what your thoughts are on the general view of what this tells us, particularly in the capital, but again, at the risk of being too London-centric, This is happening across the country. Fare dodging is not just a phenomenon in London, but we've seen a rise in pickpocketing, in shoplifting. We've talked about this the last year or so on this station a lot. Why are we seeing this general disregard for the law?
Well, I the thing that I can't work out is whether it's really on the up. It seems to be trending upwards, or whether we're just seeing a lot more footage because we all have a smartphone in it.
Yeah.
And whereas previously someone trying to run out of Lidl with a pack of baked beans in their coat just did it, and you told your family about it when you got home. Now you might film it, send it on WhatsApp, and before you know it, half the country's seeing it. So I do wonder whether some of this is just our perception is on the up because it's getting filmed. But there's, the flip side of that is when people see others getting away with it, they feel that they might as well chance it. So there's a lot of odd things at play here, and it feels to be sort of slightly deeper societal issues as much as anything.